proceedings on the KBN TV page. I am extremely delighted on the show tonight on State of the Nation to be introducing to you my guest. He basically needs no introduction, but I will do it anyway. State Counsel, and former Justice Minister who is now President of the Economic Front Party. That is the Honorable Justice Mr. Wynter Kabimba.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir, and welcome to State of the Nation.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you. I believe that there's a lot that we need to talk about tonight.
It's a great pleasure to have me at the KBN TV.
Wonderful. So, dear viewers, that is my guest for tonight, and we are discussing corruption fight and the legal framework. So, with that in mind, President Kabimba, I need to ask you, as a former Justice Minister, do you get a sense that perhaps at the moment, looking at where we are as a nation, we have inadequate or weak legal framework that we can use to investigate and indeed prosecute any matter that might need any of those aspects of the law?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to come and appear on behalf of the Economic Front. If you could permit me, before we get into the main program and even to answer those questions, I needed just to make two quick statements. The first one that I would like to make to our dear viewers there across the country is in respect of a story that appeared yesterday on social media, attributed to me, to the effect that he had made a statement that the Director of Public Prosecutions should resign. That statement did not come from me. I never made any such statement at any stage whatsoever, and it should therefore be treated as fake news, like our spokesperson of the party did post. The second one I would like to make mention of is actually in form of an apology. There is a story which is in News Diggers today, attributed to me, which I actually made, again over the issue of the DPP. And I was trying to say to the nation through that story how in 2011, PF at the time of getting into government did actually manage to have the former DPP replaced by another DPP under the PF government. Now, the story quotes me, and correctly so, as saying that the former DPP, or the DPP then was the Honorable Mr. Justice Sunday Konde. That is actually not correct. The DPP at the time was actually the Honorable Mr. Justice Charles Muchenga now, who is in the Court of Appeal. He was the DPP at the time. So I would like to start by sincerely apologizing to Honorable Mr. Justice Sunday Konde for the mix-up in the names and attributing that comment to him. It was actually intended to be Honorable Mr. Justice Muchenga at the time was DPP.
Right. So then I think that's very clear to our viewers, which brings me back to the question that as former Justice Minister yourself,
yes,
do you get a sense that perhaps our legal framework is weak and unable to fight sophisticated criminal activities that we face as a nation today?
Thank you. Let me give this some background, and I'm glad you're asking me that question as former Justice Minister. When I was Justice Minister, I did actually suggest to the President then, the late Michael Sata, and my suggestion was to the effect that white collar crime all over the world is very difficult to fight. It's a complex type of crime to fight. My proposal then was that we should form what I'd referred to as the Financial and the Crimes Unit within the police, within the DEC, or indeed any other investigating wing. I went further and said that the way we go about this is actually to pick on young men and women and especially send them for training in investigating white collar crime. And I said to the president then, if we go this route, then we'll be enhancing our fight against corruption, which is endemic in our country and which is not only prevalent in Zambia, but is prevalent all over the world. Almost all the countries, third world countries, even first world countries are still fighting corruption. So in answering the question, I was actually trying to say that our legal framework is not very tight to fight white collar crime, i.e. corruption, as we refer to it. So there is still a lot that has to be done to enable us to fight corruption effectively and make sure that society comes to appreciate successive governments that people are serious about fighting corruption.
Right. It's very interesting, President Kabimba, to hear you say that in your time, you had actually suggested the creation of a financial
and crimes
unit, which now we do have. However, there was a legal challenge recently. Some of our citizens that are facing allegations of corruption challenge the setup of the financial criminal court, saying it is prejudicial and discriminatory.
Yes.
So under what special circumstances can such a unit be set up, and must it be set up at magistrate level, or must it be set up at high court level? What are the permutations around this?
Okay. You and I have to be conscious that this matter is now sub judice. It's actually being challenged in the constitutional court. So we do not want to prejudice what would be the judgment of the constitutional court. However, there is a difference between setting up a financial crimes court and setting up a financial and crimes unit as an investigating agency, which I had then proposed. I think to answer your question, the route to go would be get this agency set up with specialized men and women in investigating white collar crime and corruption, and parallel to that or concurrent to that, get also some of our men and women on the bench, i.e. the magistrates, to go for similar training, so that you create this direct congruence or linkage between the investigators, the prosecutors, and also the adjudicators. What seems to be the case now is that there is a delinkage. There is a gap somewhere between those that investigate and those that prosecute and those that adjudicate. So you have situations where somebody is investigated for corruption, and because of social media now and the freedom of the press, freedom of expression, the whole case gets into the public domain to the extent that in the court of public opinion, an individual like that is perceived to be guilty. They have committed an offense and they are guilty. And then when the matter goes to court, there is a shortfall in the evidence and the person is acquitted. Then you get this uproar from the public. How is it that a man who was corrupt, and we know that he's corrupt, but he has been acquitted, by the courts of law. So I think this is something that we need to to work on.
Right. Now, I need to bring you, to what has been happening in the last 3 days.
Yes.
A raging debate over a fallout between the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Director General of the Anti-Corruption Commission, where the Director General of SEC rearrested Mr. Milingo Lungu on allegedly the same, charges that the Director of Prosecutions discontinued, through a nolle prosequi, which led then to the DPP writing to the Director General of SEC asking her to explain and justify why she had to rearrest and the suspect in this matter, Mr. Milingo Lungu. And as you rightly said, there has now been a public debate, and people are saying, SEC, should work autonomous, and the DPP should not interfere with the operations of SEC. I ask you a question, Mr. President, and you are a lawyer, former Justice Minister. I need, obviously this is in the public interest, that, is there a way that perhaps the DPP would have felt undermined by the actions of the SEC Director General? Can there not be collaboration between them?
Okay, let's put this matter in context. It's very clear, the law is very clear as to the mandate of the Director of Public Prosecutions as a constitutional officer. The law also is very clear as to the mandate of the Anti-Corruption Commission or the Drug Enforcement Commission. The DEC, the SEC are investigating wings. Their mandate is to investigate alleged committed offenses or suspected offenses that have been committed. Once they have done their investigations, they have to hand over their evidence and their investigating documents constituting the evidence to the DPP. It is the DPP who forms an opinion whether or not Wynter Kabimba has committed an offense. That is the mandate of the DPP. And the Constitution is very clear in defining the mandate of the DPP. It says the DPP shall not be directed by any other authority in the land. That is the only office that is not subject to any direction of any other office, not even the head of state. And we have inherited this autonomy of the DPP from our English legal system. Now, I don't know the facts in the exact facts in this case or in these circumstances, but let me share with the public what I have heard. What I've heard is that the DPP issued a nole to have Mr. Milingolungu's prosecution stopped. And when a nole is entered by the DPP, you are not acquitted, you are discharged. And the magistrate makes it very clear to you that this is not an acquittal, this is a discharge, and you may be rearrested at any time. That is what happened. Following that, a couple of days later, Mr. Milingolungu is rearrested by the DEC. And the DPP then raises the issue with the DEC. How did you rearrest Mr. Milingolungu on a matter where we had entered a nole? Now, the other story which feeds into this story is that in fact Mr. Milingolungu was two of the charges under which Mr. Milingolungu was rearrested were the charges were exactly the same charges under which he had been discharged under a nole. But the DC added one extra charge. And I think that is what made the DPP raise the question with the DEC. I want also to follow up this with the extra information which I think by now is in the public domain. That this issue of the DPP and the DEC was the correspondence was administrative. So the DPP raises this letter to the DEC. How did this happen? And that it is that letter that has led to this debate. That letter was leaked to the press by somebody that has not yet been identified. And also, you guys in the press, the headline in one of the tabloids was DPP angered by Milingo's rearrest. When you read, somebody forwarded to me a copy of that letter, the leaked letter, which is now all over social media. When you read that letter, there was no expression of anger on the part of the DPP. She was simply raising a question of clarity with the DEC as to how Mr. Milingolungu had been rearrested after a nole had been entered. And all that, in my view, should have happened would have been for the DEC to say, look, Mr. Lungu has been rearrested. Yes, there are two charges under which he was discharged, but there is an extra charge. And between the two officers, they would have resolved that issue. But for some reason, that letter gets leaked to the press, and to the press.
I'm actually happy you're raising that because it was going to be my very next question.
Yes.
You said this was raised administratively.
Yes.
And the letter that we have seen, all of us have seen on social media, was marked confidential.
Yes.
My question to you has been in the public service, really, is that what has become of our civil service that a matter that is administrative and marked confidential must be treated confidential as such? How then can we stop this rot? Yes, I know people are excited. We are in the generation of social media, but surely ethics of working in a civil service must be upheld. Is there no way to stop the rot, President Kabimba?
Let me give you my view. My view is this, that we must move away from this myth that we have a non-partisan civil service. We seem to have lived with this myth since 1991, that the public service is non-partisan, that the men and women in the public service are not politically and actively inclined to one political party as against another, that the men and women in the public service would not try to project the good image of that political party which they are affiliated to. This thing is a myth. The truth of the matter is that almost everybody who is appointed to a senior position in the public service is a member or an active supporter of the political party in power. And the sooner we become realistic that this is the situation, the better for this country, the better for the administration in the public service. Okay? I mean, to continue with this myth that the DEC, and I'm giving this an example, that the DEC Director General is not or may not be a supporter of the ruling party, that the Anti-Corruption Commission Director General may not be a supporter of the ruling party, that, the Inspector General of Police, as an example, is non-partisan, that, the Financial Intelligence Center, woman or man is non-partisan, is burying our heads in the sand. And that's why I come back to my comment in the story today, that it is normal, my brother, for any new government to identify people that it would like to work with. It's normal all over the world. It's normal. Okay? And the people that have done this, best, are the people in the United States. So a new president comes in, over 200,000 jobs have to go. Okay? So if you were National Security Advisor, if you were a PS, for example, if you go with the government that, or that goes out.
But ethics don't change.
No, the ethics don't change because the people that come in are conscious and alive to the fact that they are serving this particular administration. So this myth, that has continued, to run, that the public service in Zambia would be impartial, that the public service in Zambia would be non-partisan. It's just not true. And the result is what we see.
Right.
So let me, try to canvass this point further. You have two officers now. Okay. You have the DPP, who comes from the previous administration. Okay. And you have, for example, in this case, the
FCC director,
the ACC Director General.
Yes, Mary Chiro.
Director General, who has been appointed by
the current administration.
The current administration. Okay? You can see just from that angle that or something will not play out properly between the two offices. Okay?
But this is a constitutional office regardless of who appointed who.
No, that's the myth I'm talking about. That's the myth I'm actually trying to canvass, that we have lived with this. If, for example, had a system...
Isn't it law, President Kabimba?
Yes, that's why we have to deal with law, we have to deal with morality, we have to deal with the practicality of the situation. If, for example, let me put this point. If, for example, you had the two office bearers appointed by the current president, you would not be in this situation. That I can assure you. You would not be in this situation.
So the head of ACC, Madam Mary Chirwa,
yes,
responds not to a letter, responds through the press and says, we have our own powers.
Yes.
Now, clearly the two institutions then are not serving the same objective. So must the fight against corruption be reduced to who has more power than the other? It's a power tussle now.
No. Must the fight against corruption be dependent on who is appointed by
who?
That's what this boils down to. Okay? That's what this boils down to. One would ask a question, why didn't the Director General of ACC simply walk over, to the office of the DPP and say, this is actually what happened? Why go to the press and say, this is our mandate? Obviously, the DPP knows that that is their mandate, but she was raising a concern. So I think it would have been more civil for the Director General of ACC to write back before going to the press and start declaring, her autonomy and independence of the DPP, which the DPP, I think, was not trying to proclaim. And like I've said earlier, if the two office bearers had been appointed by the same appointing authority, this problem will not be there. So there is an aspect of partisanship, whether you like it or not, which is at play here.
So these are political undertones.
Yes.
It's the tussle of political patronage.
Yes.
Within the institutions that should ideally be impartial and non-partisan.
Yes. In institutions which you want to pretend that they shall be non-partisan, when in fact, because of the question of who appoints who, they are partisan, in my view. And that's why I make this point that if Mary Chirwa and Siuni were appointed by HH after he came into office, this problem will not be there.
Well, there are those who are calling for Madam Siuni to resign. Well, whether there is a basis for her to resign or it is on the premise that she was appointed by the previous administration, how does that sit with you?
All this is politics. All this is politics. It is. Look, I've been in the political arena in this country for a long time, over 20 years. So I know, this is politics. And anybody who is going to pretend, that this is not politics, that this is not driven by the UPND senior leadership, that this is just an isolated incident, may not be truthful. And that's why I go back to 2011, when President Sata decided that he was going to promote the DPP who was in office then as judge, and then appoint a new DPP. Okay? Now, somebody was saying to me, no, but you see, that was a secret meeting, No, it was not a secret meeting. It is intended to teach us and the future generations that there is a better way of handling these issues. If, for example, today I'm president of this nation, I was going to follow Michael Sata's approach to an issue like this, because I thought that it was most amicable. Okay, nobody harassed the DPP. We allowed the DPP to exit, honorably. He went to the bench. Another individual was appointed as DPP. We were happy, and the former DPP was happy. The current DPP, was happy. That was the most civil way of going about, and nobody had, or got to hear about this. I'm saying it now for the first time. Why? Because I would like people to know and realize that this kind of thing has been done before by a statesman like Michael Sata, who did it in a better way than the kangaroo method that we are seeing today.
So now we have yesterday some non-UPND cadres who have gone to police to report Mrs. Lillian Siuni that she's objecting and blocking the dispensing of justice.
No, look at it this way. I saw, I don't know whether you are referring to the clip which I watched just this evening. Okay? I watched a clip on ZNBC just before coming to the studio here for this interview of 3 young men, one of whom I know very well because he was in the Rainbow Party. And you know what ZNBC does? First, they are given coverage just to deliver a letter to the Office of the Inspector General of Police. ZNBC crew was there. And then, after they have delivered the letter, they are given a space where they are making this statement and these demands. Thirdly, ZNBC is timid to tell this nation that these are UPND cadres. What do they say in their news item? Concerned citizens. All this is politics. ZNBC is playing politics. Those boys are playing politics. Okay?
That young man is a youth publicity secretary, something.
In UPND.
In UPND.
And yet ZNBC says concerned citizens instead of saying UPND cadres, because they know that there is politics at play, so they don't want to expose that this is a UPND agenda. So they put a caption, concerned citizens. Surely you guys in the press must be ashamed.
My question is,
some of the things that you do.
Does that even hold water to report the DPP that she's objecting or preventing the dispensing of justice? You are a lawyer. I need for you to just give us a bit of insight.
Look, there is this groundswell now, of how the UPND wants the DPP to go. Okay? 2 days ago, there was a statement from the provincial chairman of the UPND for Lusaka. We shall hound the DPP if she doesn't vacate office. We shall hound. I've never heard the president come out, even as he preaches the promotion of the rule of law, to say that this language is unacceptable because it doesn't promote the rule of law. The man is quiet. I've never heard the Secretary General of the party, of the UPND, because the provincial chairman falls under the Secretary General's office. I've never heard him come out publicly to condemn that acerbic language, that toxic language from the provincial chairman. Everybody is quiet. So clearly, even if you are blind, you are able to see that this is a well-calculated scheme to hound out the DPP for reasons that they cannot disclose and pretend that it's because the DPP has done this and she has done that and she has done that. I want to tell you one thing. I don't know the DPP in person, as a person. I've never met her. But I think that as a citizen of this country, injustice against any citizen, whether I know them or I don't know them, whether I like them or I don't like them, is injustice. And this is injustice. And the HH must be ashamed as a president to be presiding over a government and a political party that is trying to hound a constitutional office bearer in the manner that they are doing. Just like I said that ECL, Edgar Chagwalungu, should have been ashamed in the manner they hounded Mutembonchito out of office. Okay? So, this must come to an end. Let us be a civilized society. I've never heard donors, that preach, human rights, the rule of law. They support programs in the Ministry of Justice, in the police. I've never heard any ambassador raise the red flag that this is not the way of doing things.
So on that score, really, people expected this nation to be moving forward. If President Edgar Lungu made the same mistake over Mtembonchito, now we have the UPND administration
making the same
mistake.
Yes.
All these people are then just a turncoat from green to red, but same behavior.
Of course, you have changed the guard, but nothing changes. What is interesting is the pontification from HH that he is very different from Edgar Lungu. That is what I really find, difficult to stomach, because he's not showing any change at all. Okay? And when you put forward this argument, what do you get from UPND? You hear things like, oh no, but you never said this when Edgar, was doing, these things. But HH came and won this last election by telling the Zambian people, I'm going to stop all the iniquities, all the bad things that PF were doing as a political party and as a government. And because the people trusted him that he could stop this culture of vindictiveness, this culture, of injustice, this culture of impunity in breaching the rule of in breaching the rules, of justice, they believed in him. A man gets into State House, does exactly the same thing, and he carries himself on like he is now the Messiah. I'm uniting the country. What country are you uniting? When you're doing things just the way, or PF was doing them.
So it does look like once you get in power, really, everything ceases to matter. Well, was that your experience?
Remember what Iseo said at the funeral of Arabi? It's too much hypocrisy. Okay?
Perhaps he cannot be excused from that.
That's what I'm saying. Himself. That I hope in that statement he included himself.
Yes.
There's too much hypocrisy once people get into office. But Iseo is gone now. Here is a man who said, me, I'm the Messiah.
Right.
I shall fix everything.
Some very interesting revelation from a press conference that was held yesterday by Mr. Rafo Nakachinda, the publicity chairperson for the former ruling party, PF. In that press conference, he alleges that there was a meeting which was attended by the president, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Msokotwane, and the Minister of Justice, Honorable Ahimbe, to the effect that they hosted Mr. Miringolungu, persuading him to resign as the liquidator of KCM and pave way for the state to take over the running of KCM, or perhaps to sell it to Woodby. Hence the Nole Prosequi. Now, I am privy to the fact that the Justice Minister is trying to make a case and sue for defamation of whoever might be involved in that. But what do you make of that kind of a revelation from Mr. Nakachinda, that there was a meeting that was held, the president was part of it, Minister of Justice and Finance Minister, to say a deal was basically cut? And it's all over social media, it's in the press today, and as I said, I am privy to the fact that the Justice Minister is working on some lawsuit of defamation of character. But out of all this hula baloo, what do you make of that?
Look. If you are going to be in public office, you are not a private citizen. So your character must be subject to extreme scrutiny. And you can't be running around with writs suing people. Now let me go back a bit just to tie in what Raphael Nakachinda could have said yesterday, and there was an audio, if you remember. Oh, you should remember, because you were summoned by the police over that audio as KBN, between the PS at the Ministry of Home Affairs and the President's Special Assistant on Politics. Clear audio, telephone conversation between the two, in which discussion was actually tantamount to circumventing the rights of the Democratic Party to participate in the Kabata by-election, parliamentary by-election. And in that audio, the political special assistant for politics to the president, Levi Ngoma, says, I had a meeting with the president and the vice president over this matter yesterday. That's what he says in that audio. We didn't hear anybody in the State House deny the fact that there was such a meeting. We didn't hear anybody saying that I'm going to sue. So, if that happened, or better still, let me put it this way, we never heard anybody in government who said, I want to have this matter investigated so that we get to the bottom of, of it. We never heard, Tabo Kawanake, on TV the same evening. What did he say? That is a concocted and fabricated audio. You see that by the end of the day today, I don't know what time he was interviewed, the perpetrators or the fabricators of that conversation will be arrested. Nobody has been arrested to date. Instead, what did we see? A call out, to KBA TV. Why did you run, that audio? What else did we see? A call out, to Harikalava as the leader of the DP. So I don't think that what Raphael Nakachinda said could be very far from the truth. I don't think that. Remember what the reaction that came from the State House. Those that what was the word used? Betraying the president.
Traitors.
Those traitors.
So you cannot say traitors if there is no truth.
Exactly. If there is no truth, why are you talking about the traitors? If the meeting didn't take place, why are you talking about the traitors?
Traitors, yes.
You can only talk about the traitors if there's some truth which you didn't want to come into the public domain. And now, for some reason, it has come out. That's the only way you can talk about traitors.
Well, we are discussing the fight against corruption and the legal framework in Zambia. My guest on the program is the president of the Economic Front and former Justice Minister, helping us to understand the legal aspects of the fight of corruption that we are seeing, taking place right now. A very unfortunate, incident, President Kabimba, happened in Eastern Province, where a fallen man by the name of Suzy Onyika body was exhumed on the pretext that they suspected he faked his death and that dollars may have been buried. From what we are reading in the news, I'm just reciting what we have been reading in the news and on social media. Embarrassingly, from what we hear, that the body was found there, and of course DNA will be carried out. But then my question and the question of the Zambian public, is that the way to fight corruption, to go and exhume the dead? And also, what happened to the intelligence information that we are gathering as leads? How can you say, Mr. Former Justice Minister, sir, with due respect, that we suspect someone faked their death? What is buried in there is not a body. There must have been some body viewing. Really, what's happening here?
Look, former President Kaunda used to refer to a scenario like this as that of frightened little men. If Kaunda had to come back to life today, he would actually refer to UPND leadership as frightened little men and women, who are busy chasing shadows, or their own shadows, instead of progressing this country, which is in dire economic crisis. Okay? Like you say, where is the intelligence? In Eastern Province, whether it is in Chipata, there is a provincial intelligence officer there. There is a district intelligence officer there. From the way I understand the system myself, there are intelligence operatives in that area. And the president receives the briefs once in the morning, once in the evening. What did they say about this particular case? I'll tell you the problem, as I saw it myself in government. There is too much reliance on gossip and not the system. There's too much reliance by party leaders, including the president, on cheap street gossip and not the system. If you are going to fire all the 10 provincial intelligence officers, and you are going to fire all the directors at the Red Brick, in the hope that you are going to have those that will be feeding you with the correct intelligence, then you are just killing the system and you are killing the country. And this is what we see. Okay? Intelligence is not for the president. The intelligence system, the state security system, is for the state.
Not for the president.
And the president is not the state. He is just the repository of that power on behalf of the state. So, intelligence sometimes will tell the president what he doesn't want to hear. Okay? And he has to take it, because that is the intelligence. But if you want to be president and you also want to have an intelligence system, and you also want to run a parallel intelligence system of gossipers, then you just be fumbling every day.
Isn't it embarrassing then that you dig up, exhume a body and you find that it's
Obviously,
not what you expected?
Obviously it is. Obviously it is. You can only do that, if your intelligence is very certain that this is what is there. But all this is just gossip within UPND. Kodi Mwavera boss, Kodi Mwavera president. Do you know Edgar's friend? Do you know that the guy who is buried in Chipata is actually not the real one? The one who is Edgar's friend has run away to Zimbabwe or South Africa. And because you have so much time, to listen to silly gossip, you start acting on that, and you end up getting embarrassed.
Well, very interesting to hear from you as an experienced lawyer, as an experienced civil servant on the place of intelligence in governance. So where do you see the importance of intelligence today as things stand? Not that we are supposed to discuss.
No. My brother, we need to build all these institutions. We need to give confidence to the men and women in the police that they can execute their professional duty in a professional manner. We need to accord the men and women in the intelligence the respect that they are trained and that they are going to execute their responsibilities in a professional manner. Let me tell you an incident about the late President Kaunda. I like going back to KK because I learned a lot during that time. Towards the end of his term, I remember there was a press conference at the State House, and there was a journalist from the BBC who stood up during that press conference by KK and said to KK, why is it, President Kaunda, that of late we have seen the beefing up of your security? We have seen more paramilitary police around you with guns, are you feeling insecure? Was the question. And I watched that press conference myself. And KK answered. First he laughed. Giggled, his usual laughter, if you remember it. And he said, my dear sister, I wish I could answer that question. I also see those people that you see around me. I don't know who brings them there, and I don't even know what they are doing around me. What KK was saying is, I am not in charge of my security. I'm not in charge of the intelligence regarding my security. There is a team of trained men and women that are charged with that responsibility by the state. Okay? What we see now is the president trying to become an intelligence officer. What we see now is the president trying to become a police officer. What we try to see now is the president trying to become an investigator. What we see now is the president trying to visit, the Ministry of Health and become minister or PS to ensure that the shortage of drugs is addressed. Does he really know what his work is in the State House? The job of the president is to spend sleepless nights thinking about the problems of this country and what solutions, according to his vision, would save this country out of this free-fall economy. That's the job of the president. Not to go and address a meeting at the Ministry of Health and take the seat of the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health takes the seat of the PS, and the PS takes the seat of the director. And he says, that's what I'm going to do, to all the ministries. Where do you find time, sir, to do that? That is time wasted. But I'm giving these examples, my brother, to answer your question. That once we have a leader in that office who is going to respect the police, respect the judiciary, respect the state security, respect all these institutions, and say to them, get on with the work, because I believe that you are trained and you know the calling of your profession. You see a difference in this country. You see a major difference in this country.
So I know we are almost coming to the end of our program, but I need to say that today, obviously, like me, you may have seen reports of some properties that have been seized from the former Minister of Lusaka, Mr. Bowman Lusambo, by the Anti-Corruption Commission. Obviously, he held public office, and to his name, all those properties, including animals that I saw today for the first time. I didn't know there was some animals in the backyard. Surely, is that witch hunt, or that is just making someone to account for what they've amassed in a short period of being a minister? What do you think of that?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me say this, that for me, anybody that has stolen from the Zambian people must account for that action, irrespective of what they are or who they are, even if they are my friends. Because legally it is wrong, morally it is wrong. Point number one. Point number two, there is no public office that makes you rich. Never in the world. That's why in the developed world, people decline to take up a public job, because it actually makes you poor, because it is a service. So, if you get into the office, and this is where this issue of declaring assets is important. If you get into office, and in Zambia, the family of politicians is very small. We know each other, and the public knows all of us. They know how we live. They know what we are. They know what we have. If today you were driving a Corolla, you become a member of parliament, then the only extra vehicle that you may have is the vehicle that you get on loan from parliament. So you can have a GX. Okay? But if after 5 years or 2 years, you are parking 30 vehicles in your yard. If after 3 years you have built 7 houses or you have purchased 7 houses, I was minister myself. I know the salary of a minister. I know the allowances, of the minister. You can't accumulate that kind of wealth in that period. Even if you saved all that money without buying a bag of mini meal, you can't. So, I am in full support of the anti-corruption's application of Section 58, which shifts the burden of proof to me
as a suspect,
to explain how I acquired what I have after holding public office. Because if we do that, people will start censoring themselves. There will be self-censorship that I will not go into, let me work hard by staying outside the public office. I'll give you my own example. When I was appointed by Mr. Sata as Minister of Justice, the PS at the Ministry of Justice came to me and said, can we swap the vehicle that you have? I found the vehicle had been used by the previous minister, late Sebastian Zulu, who was only in the office for a year. They said, can we get this vehicle, take it back to Works and Supply so that we give you a brand new vehicle? I refused. I said, this vehicle is as good as new. I don't need another new vehicle. Okay? I continued using that vehicle. They came to me and said, Works and Supply are saying that they want to go and show you the ministerial house where you're supposed to move to. I refused. I said, I live in my house on Independence Avenue. I don't need a ministerial house. I'll continue living in my house. I went to Parliament. They brought me forms, to buy, to get a loan from Parliament and buy a motor vehicle. I refused. I said, I've got enough vehicles. I don't need an extra vehicle. So when I was finally fired, and I knew that I could be fired, so I didn't want, paramilitary people coming, with the guns, and say, get out of the house, and I didn't want to stress my family, And what happened when I was fired? These PF cadres that were being paid, by some of my colleagues, started jubilating. They didn't know that it was my house. They started pointing at some of my vehicles. Government. They didn't know that it was my vehicle. So the point I'm making is that public office, if you really are going to save the people of this country, will not make you rich. I have some of my projects myself that personal projects that have suffered as a result of my 2 years as Minister of Justice and the period that I served as Secretary General of PF. So that is what I know, And I'm speaking from experience.
So all former ministers should not feel victimized. They must answer to the law and justify where they got the wealth.
They must just answer and say that this wealth that I've accumulated, I either went to a papa who prayed for me,
or I sold my ears to Dubai.
And the papa was able to multiply, money for me, and I could call him, the man is in Tanzania or in Botswana. They must just explain. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we have more and more criminals clamoring, for public office. And I'm happy, this I can give credit to HH, that I'm happy, that he has appointed, a man like State Counsel Musa Mwenye, whom I worked with, when I was Minister of Justice. A young man of integrity and honest and honor to head the Anti-Corruption Commission. And I'm sure we shall see the fight against corruption take a proper and clear direction from now onwards. And that's what we need to see.
On that note, I'd like to thank my guest, the President of Economic Front, Mr. Wynter Kabimba. Is obviously a former Minister of Justice and is State Counsel, a man who has cut his teeth in the legal fraternity, and he was helping us to understand the corruption fight in Zambia and the legal framework, whether it is solid enough and sufficient enough to be able to give us a trajectory that we want. Obviously, this has been State of the Nation, and I'm so glad that you could find time to join us. We will continue to give you